That's nice.
Good EP. I was gonna go for the mix-up. Yes, he does in good games.
I mean, he'll win, but barely.
Oh my god!
Wait, will you? Oh my god!
All right. Hello, hello. You should be able to hear me now. Maybe, maybe not. Not that I think anyone's going to be here, but it's going to be a long one, so strap yourselves in. And welcome from the future, well, to the future. If people may or may watch this. And yes, good evening from the UK. We are here doing a very exciting topic, which is the tier list for 2024 from me, which means everyone will ignore it. But, you know, it's always fun to do these, just to even think about it as a thought experiment. It's fun to do, you know. And we even have our favourite Labrys player here, Kanji. Hello. But, yeah, as you can see from the description in the bottom left, this is basically just a breakdown of my current list, the logic behind it, and sort of higher level discussion. Longer discussion will take a while because I think there's 37 characters in total. And you know, if we spent 5 minutes on each character, that in itself is over 3 hours, I think. So we're going to go quickly for the most part. Just talk about the high level stuff. And yeah, we'll go from there. Hopefully some people will find it interesting. We'll see. Anyway, let's get started. Yeah, and a quick note just about me. I think it's important to remember when looking at these sort of opinions. You can think of it sort of like a film critic. You have to understand the person before you can understand the opinion, and sort of let that shape how you think about it. So, first off, yes, me. I am this character.
Pretty good.
It's basically just something I had lying around. Cute mascot character from Hololive. You know, it's nice. It's just have something in the corner, in my opinion. So there it goes. Thank you for the follow. But yeah, that's me. Very cute character. Isn't actually what I look like in real life, surprisingly. But what might be more important and some decent context for what sort of player I am. Oh, good evening there, Cranium. So in terms of fighting games that I've played in the past, this is most of it. Anything else I would have probably touched once and never touched again. So Super Smash Bros. Brawl is technically my first ever fighting game. It's a funny one to start with, to be honest. Sort of the sort of player who looked up all the pro strats online and could destroy their friends and had all their friends sort of gang up to try and beat them, but never actually played pro or played anyone remotely serious either. Lucario and Lucas mainly for the friends because you had lots of AoE stuff. Lucario when I was being slightly more serious against the level 9 CPUs. But there you go. A British man who wins Champions League. Champions League is football. We don't talk about football here. But yeah, other than that, that's basically my main experience with Smash. I briefly touched Melee with Marth, but nothing really important after that. BlazBlue, CPEX and CF. CPEX was when I played Makoto kind of semi-seriously, was sort of dragged into it by some of the other EU crowd. And CF, I didn't really play much at all, to be honest. But yeah, nothing really much to say there. BB Tag, again, played briefly during the very early stages of that game, sort of during the Gordo era, if people remember that. Played Labrys when she came out. I don't think she came out immediately. I actually can't remember. Yeah, lots of BB tag fans in the chat, I can see. But yeah, Labrys and Ruby. It was kind of fun playing Ruby as well. Lots of people complimented my Labrys neutral because I could still play Labrys neutral, which was nice. Yeah, but she wasn't strong. She had some interesting stuff, but they also removed some of her best buttons, which kind of sucked too. Respect for Lucario. Yeah, Lucario... yeah, I like my characters, honestly, in Brawl. Brawl was a fun game apart from the tripping. And, you know, playing with friends, all the items too, but... Yeah, it was a fun era. Yeah, it was good fun. Who'd you play NBM? I'd be interested to see who you played in Brawl or similar Smash games. But yeah, that's that. After BB Tag was multi-blood type Lumina again during the sort of first season when Shield was very strong. Played Kahaku. Kahaku, I think, was decent at the time. Sort of got stronger over time as Shield got weaker because a lot of her set play gets beaten by Shield unless you play absolutely frame perfectly. So, I don't know. I just never really liked Shield. And yeah, Kahaku also, the main reason I chose Kahaku is because she has cat ears in some of her animations. Can't resist that. But yeah, Kahaku stuff. Is she low tier now? Interesting. Yeah, I know she doesn't have a DP. She never had a good DP. Even solo. Yeah, maids... Well, I never really felt like I could use maids well, and I took the moon skill DP over... Actually, no, you're right. I did play maids. I am joking. I played maids just with Kahaku in front all the time. Because, yeah, maids had the projectile, didn't she, on the moon skill, which is probably just slightly better than the awful DP. I'm remembering it now. It was a while back, as you can tell. But yeah, it was maids. You are right. We have discovered a new thing here. And yeah, Kahaku pressure wasn't great. I mean, she had some decent set play with the plants, which is what I liked playing with, like with the ultra low air dash that you could do. You could high low into plant really well, but she'll just beat everything if the plant hit first, and that kind of sucked. But yeah, that's enough about Melty. I played it a decent amount with Saber and some of the other EU crew, but never really got serious. Am I going to play the new patch on TL? I don't think so. I mean, I've got enough on my plate in terms of fighting games right now, which kind of brings me to my next point, which is Granblue. So I didn't play the original, but I have been playing since this year, actually. I think I picked Anila up during the new year when she was on the free rotation. And yeah, Anila is interesting, good fun. I think not one of the stronger characters. I currently have her... I basically play ranked only. I have her at S++ right now. Still climbing. Hopefully we'll get to Masters one day. But yeah, good fun, nice cheap character. Reminds me of Watame, which is why I picked her. As you can see, I have very sensible reasons for picking my characters in games. You can probably see quite a strong trend as we've gone on in the years. Not so much with Smash, just to make that point clear. But yeah, those are the other fighting games I have played. I've basically taken somewhat seriously, although Persona is the only one I've really taken to a high level, to be honest. But yeah, those are the fighting games. Other games that I have played at a high level, just in case you're curious. Heroes of the Storm, I was a master rank player. DPS healer flex. Greymane was probably my best range DPS, at least in pretty much all around, to be honest. I had a decently Ming as well. Sorry, I'm playing Heroes. Heroes of the Storm was a very good game while it was supported. And basically once they killed the esports league, I stopped playing. And yeah, it was Blizzard destroying what was quite a good game in my opinion. But yeah, DPS and healer, both strong roles that I feel can change the flow of a game, which is why I liked playing them in solo queue. And yeah, I got to master rank by myself. Played HOTS because you're too poor to buy Overwatch. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. And it was a good game. I played both at the same time, actually, Overwatch and Heroes of the Storm. In terms of FPS, I've never really been good at them. Like, I've had a decent shot up a lot of CODs and Apex and Overwatch. Kind of like mediocre gold, plat level at all of them. I just kind of suck at aiming, to be honest, and have awful reaction times. The other one I've mentioned here is Supreme Commander Forged Alliance. To any goats who actually realise what that is, it is, well, yeah, hello. And to anyone who doesn't, it's a real-time strategy, one of the best of all time in my opinion. Although it is also one of the only ones that I have played, so I might be biased. But yeah, played a lot of that, played decently in ranked, got to around 1400 MMR, which is like bordering on, like not quite pro level. Like it's a decent way up there. Played mostly Cybran for their level 1 air gunships. Very nice rush down strat. Could think of it like a Zerg rush, but a little bit more sophisticated. But yeah, that is a decent rundown of other games I've played. In terms of my history with Persona 4 Arena now, getting into the more important stuff with regards to this tier list. So I played all the way from vanilla. Let me get the laser pointer out. So yeah, introduced to me by a friend. I actually didn't pick it up myself. I was a Persona fan at the time. And it was actually my first anime fighter. So I had played Smash before then. So I knew fighting games kind of, but not really in the same way. But yeah, picked it up. Actually played Narukami at first just because I'm the sort of person who gets used to something and just tries to stick with it. But then found Labrys through the challenge mode, liked how her combos worked, liked how she played. Kind of liked how simple her combos were, to be honest. Hey Beef, good to see you. So yeah, switched to Labrys pretty quickly, to be honest. Was quite low level, but so was everyone at the time. Sort of worked my way up. It was very funny. I remember my earliest memories of this game being spamming Labrys DP and my opponent molding, saying it's too strong. Little did they know. But yeah, that's where I met most of the EU community as well, including D-Star and Saber, who is probably the only remaining one at the moment. But yeah, that was a long and fruitful relationship. We did many robot battles together over the years, like in the thousands at least, maybe in the tens of thousands at this point. And yeah, it became my favorite game very quickly. I have a lot of things I love about this game in terms of its design. I think even compared with modern games, like comparing it to Grand Blue, I love a lot of the systems and the way they work. I think they are incredibly well designed. They communicate information to the player in a way that most other games don't do. Like visually, even through sound, like the sound design is also incredible. You can basically tell what's going on with your eyes closed. And it's just such a joy to both watch and sort of see games unfold. There's lots of ways of expressing yourself. The player expression is immaculate. There's so many good systems that for the most part work together. But yeah, it's a really nice game. And I do hope that Arxis will continue to support it. I mean, they released a remake, which is probably more than I was expecting. I wasn't expecting to ever get 2.0, well, what became 2.5/remake. So I think they're going to keep it up. It doesn't really cost them that much to keep a server running. So yeah, I don't think they're ever going to patch it again, which is probably fine, to be honest. But there we go. Some context here for characters that I've played a lot, so maybe my opinion might mean something. Aigis is obviously D-Star's /Shabrys character. Mitsuru, I have played a lot of Mitsuru. One of the top EU players was a Mitsuru player. So that's probably why I do decently in that matchup. Yosuke was mostly in P4A, but I do have a decent idea of how to sort him out the sky because of it. And Liz, again, one of the most commonly played matchups that I have done is Liz. So I do have a good idea of exactly how weak she was. And I say was. But there we go. Where's the tier list that everyone's going to get mad at? We're getting there, Beef. We're getting there. We're building up to it. The riots will occur eventually. In terms of Ultimax, I picked it up on the Japanese release. I actually picked up a Japanese copy because that's what everyone in EU was doing at the time. Was still a Labrys main. Pocket Minazuki. I mean, everyone had a Pocket Minazuki in 1.1. This isn't anything special. I didn't ever actually play them, to be honest. It's mostly just for playing against newer players. Played mostly on and off. So I did go to university at some point, which I stopped playing for. But still, during the summer and other times, played bits here and there. against mostly the same characters, although the Yosuke player had switched to Sho at that point, so decent knowledge of that one too, although Sho just kind of played quite uniquely between different people. And in terms of remake, I was very happy when this was announced. It's really when I picked up the game more seriously. So like even during both of these eras, there were other players I would say were a lot better than me. I think there was even an EU Labrys who I would say was possibly better than me at the time. I think his name was Eagle. I can't remember. But yeah, this is when I really started to sort of take the game slightly more seriously and play consistently over time. So yeah, that is the history. In terms of the sort of player that I am, to those who don't know, I am a Labrys main and pretty much only a Labrys main at this point. 14k games on PC. I have a lot more games both on PS2 and obviously in previous versions. NVM stealing my views, is he? I don't care too much. We're just here to talk to ourselves. But yeah, I am a very aggressive player. I will go in if given the chance. I am trying to work on throwing out some more orbs here and there. But other than that, it doesn't really matter too much. Yeah, we're just joking around, MBM. Don't worry about it. But yeah, very aggressive player. Kind of part of the character, to be honest. If you're not going in, you are losing axe level for the most part. I am quite opportunistic. I am very slippery on defense. I have been told that I don't like blocking. I mean, what Persona player does? I mean, the main issue being with Labrys as well, you don't have many normal ways out, so you have to try what you can. So I am very happy to try and roll, to try and up back, grab. Sometimes match with the 5A. The Labrys 5A is actually decent at range if they're trying to move in again to reset pressure. I am not great at reacting to visuals. People will be able to AoE me. I will get used to it eventually, but you know. And sort of the visually indistinct mix-ups and stuff where you might have to see whether they've landed or not the best. But I am good with audio cues. So for example, like I will be able to hear if Ken sends his dog from off screen to attack. I can probably 2B that on reaction pretty decently, consistently. And yeah, all the other audio cues. So for stuff like Labrys aerial guillotine into DB Slink, I will use the audio cue for that. And I just like the audio design in this game as a whole, to be honest. I will mostly attempt to read player habits and adjust accordingly. Again, kind of because Labrys doesn't have much of a game plan by herself. Most of what I enjoy doing is trying to see what sort of person my opponent is and try and play around that. Just because A, it's effective, and B, it's fun. You know, that's, in my opinion, the best part about fighting games is you get to interact with people. They're not CPUs. You get to learn who they are, how they play. It's nice. When I say methodical here, it's mostly I will go into training mode and learn stuff. I will try and figure out exactly what does and doesn't work. I keep my own set of notes, including the guide and actually my own OneNote based on both things I want to do and things that work against every single opponent option that matters. For example, I will have notes on every single super and my responses to DPs on block against every opponent, and make sure to take a note of those and what is good and isn't good in each matchup. Before I even play someone, I will grab my notes and have a look through. That's sort of who I am. Feel and flow, again, I do have a bit of that here and there, but less reliant on that, I guess I'd say. Can hold my own against top players. So I have played a majority of the top players who are currently active in NA. I wish I could play JP. Sadly, the connection to EU is just not quite good enough. But yeah, I do hold my own. So I would go even against most top players, to be honest. And against most people below, I do have a decent win rate against. I can shut a lot of people out. Have 100% win rate against quite a lot of people. At least in some sets. But yeah, I think I am a decent player of this game. And I did win PFC number 6. Sadly, has been lost to history. The VoD has been eaten by the void. And the Swiss portion of the Chris Charity Tournament, you can see down here, the 3 winners of that one. It was kind of tied due to the way the Swiss format works. I technically won, but it doesn't really matter. So that's me, Kyo, and Saber. So lots of robots, lots of EU. Very nice. NA showing how strong they are as a region. But yeah, that is me. And yeah, just sort of adding on to the points about being a Labrys main, because people will say, oh, this is all you do, so how do you know about the game? So yeah, Labrys by herself doesn't actually have many tools that are good in isolation. So by that I mean you don't really throw stuff out apart from the jump B, and you can't really skip neutral in that way or skip pressure. There's very few things you can do that ignores your opponent's options. She has decent baselines for things, but you're quite focused on your opponent. So this next point, her tools are very good if you have a good read on what your opponent is doing, or if you have to try and counter an opponent option, she has some quite effective tools. So for example, if you know your opponent's going to throw out a chest attribute move, her sweep is very good for dealing with that, given how much range it has, and it's chest invuln from frame 4 like all the others. And the snowballing aspect of her character also means that making that good call can lead to you winning that round pretty quickly, if you manage to keep things consistent and get your knockdowns. So she has tools, they're just sort of, you're waiting on getting a good read on your opponent for the most part. She struggles against characters with good zoning, so yeah, she doesn't have really many good anti-zoning tools. SB Chain is an anti-zoning tool, it's just kind of bad. And that will mean that I will probably overvalue zoning and strength at range a little bit more than other people will. Whether that's important or not is up to you. But yeah, I appreciate I will have some bias there. Her defensive tools... defensive tools work well on her. So her pressure has lots of gaps in it. So if you have lots of different ways of dealing with her trying to mix you up using, like if she gives you a gap, which is basically always, because to those who don't know, she can't leave her A buttons without leaving a gap. Yeah, they work really well in her. So I will probably slightly overvalue a defensive tool just because they annoy me a lot. And you know, everyone has one in this game apart from Labrys. Aigis backdash, I do not agree, is a strong defensive tool. And Labrys actually deals with that very well, weirdly. That is the one exception. But we move on. So yeah, her defensive tools also work decently on characters who do slower long range hits. So like Mitsuru, like Margaret. Those who outrange normal DPs. So I will consider the offense of some ranged characters to be slightly worse than they probably are. So I don't particularly rate Mitsuru pressure very high, but yeah, that's just a quirk that comes with playing Labrys. What about her jump 214 AB as a bait? Who's jump 214 AB beef? What are you referring to? Because yeah, Labrys air guillotine is very dangerous to use, I guess, as a whole. I mean, Aigis is Aigis is jump 214 AB. What's that? Oh, that's the other one. Yeah, is that bullets? Is that falling bullets? I can't remember. You're gonna have to remind me, beef. In any case, yeah, I mean, dealing with that is tricky for Labrys because you have to either get over or under it fast enough, and Labrys dash options are slow. I suppose that's another point. Labrys, because her dash acceleration is slightly slower than normal, her dash is slightly worse. I will still use it, but yeah, you can't get under stuff quite as easily as other characters. So I will probably overvalue those slightly more as well. But yeah, that's that. So, a quick explanation of the tier list before we jump into it. I have split it into the following categories. So, let's make sure this is still working. So Untouchable tier. This basically means if you want to win and all you want to do is win and you don't care about anything else, you have no excuse to not be playing a character in this tier. It's basically meta defining. That's basically all there is to it. Like, why would you not play these characters if you have the choice and you don't care about anything else apart from winning? And if you are playing these characters, you are the characters to beat. There is no one who consistently does well against you, and basically you have the highest chance of winning if on an even skill playing field, in my opinion. That's that. The competitive tier basically means you can compete with most of these untouchable characters without getting completely shut out. And you just generally have the stronger tools in the game. Your character comes with a lot of stuff that can open people up or win neutral without too much more effort or the requirement of reading your opponent in a significant manner, and just sort of carries a lot of threat with their hits as well, so you usually can 2 to 3 touch people with good hits, that sort of character. And you'll find out, as you can see, it's the only one here with 2 levels because a lot of the characters fit here. Overall, I think the game is quite balanced, so I don't think anyone here is impossible to win with. We have seen people win tournaments with the characters here, as you will see. I think it is actually quite impressive how well balanced this game is for the most part. There are some unwinnable matchups, but when I say unwinnable, I mean like 8-2s. I'm not saying 10-0s. And in general, when playing this game, in general, when playing this game, I think the more skilled player wins about 90% of the time. There are some exceptions in first to 2s, but in a longer set, I think this game does a very good job of making sure a better player wins, which is one of the reasons I enjoy playing it, to be honest. And sort of one of the other reasons why I don't sort of doom on some of the weaker characters, because they can still play the game and have fun, which is the important part. So strong but outclassed here basically means I think they are somewhat competitive, but again, they don't quite have the tools to be consistent in the same way that these characters are. Basically, again, why would you play these characters when these characters exist for the most part? They have their own quirks and they have their ways to open people up, but it's not quite as threatening. Let's blame MBM for all the bad characters, by the way. That's a very good way of doing things. And yeah, I also wish that the Untouchable tier didn't exist. It's basically just a mistake in balancing, in my opinion. And if these characters got nerfed, I think I would say this is almost a perfect game. And the can be made to work tier basically means I think these have some really nice tools on them, but it's not quite enough. Or they have some rough matchups with the Untouchable tier. And that can really make your tournament run just really inconsistent, even if you are a strong player. Or you just, you're liable to get shut out in a way that is probably unfair. So, not impossible to play with, but, has most of what you need to win. And that kind of separates them from this final tier, which is will struggle, which is you don't have the tools you need to win in some cases, or you're missing some major tools. So you don't have access to X mechanic, or it just takes you far too much to do something. Or you have to outplay your opponent by so much, or you have an impossible matchup up here. That is basically the tiers. And I will also be introducing a grading system for the characters. This is basically just my way of giving a rough rundown of how I feel a character does. I've broken it down into categories. So defense. Mostly covers reversal options. So how risky is your reversal option? What sort of punishes do people get if you press your reversal options? How many reversal options do you have? How available are they? Do they take resources, for example? And how useful they are? So what sort of options do they cover? So, for example, a strong defensive option I would argue is Marie's Shell of Denial. It does take 50 meter, but it is available on DP. It covers every single angle. It is quite hard to punish. A weaker defensive option, I would argue. Let's not use Labrys DP. Who else has a weak defensive game? I think Junpei. Actually, let me get my spreadsheet out because I do have a spreadsheet of all the data here. Marge DP is a decently weak defensive option. Yeah, it basically has no range and loses to a lot of other options. But I think her defense as a whole is slightly different. Let me grab this. Who have I scored poorly? Akihiko in general has... Yeah, Akihiko's the other one. Akihiko is a has weak defense because a lot of his mash is very low range, so it can be outranged by a lot of stuff. And his DP, again, very low horizontal range, covers upwards, doesn't actually get much off of it. But yeah, another weaker character. Heavenly Spear. I don't know why you're mentioning Heavenly Spear. Maybe as a strong defensive option. Well, it's okay. It actually quite easy to punish after Super Flash, for example. And it used to have a lot more damage than it does now. I don't think it's as threatening as it used to be. I think it's good. I don't think it's great. Because supers that can be answered and punished on reaction. It doesn't have good horizontal range, it's true, and you can jump over her. So it has a lot of dead zones, effectively. Most of the screen. But yeah, it also no longer does as much damage as it used to, which is the main problem with it now. It used to do like 4k. It no longer does. I'm very happy about that. But yeah, that's defense. It is plus on block, but like I said, why are you blocking? Basically. It's rollable on reaction. Why are you blocking it? Okay, neutral. So neutral, when I talk about neutral, I basically mean what sort of movement options do you have? Do you have a fast dash? Can you get across the screen? Can you cover a lot of the screen in a very short period of time? Do you have extra air options? What general neutral buttons you have? What sort of threat that puts out? And what you can get from them, and the ability to convert from those buttons. If you're a zoner, the sort of keep away options you have and how dangerous those are. And in sort of what projectiles you have, any counter projectiles options you have too. That's also an important point in neutral. Let me just see. What else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so an important point in neutral as well. If you're given space, can you establish a threat? A good example of that would be Rise. So I'd say she has pretty decent neutral. If you leave her alone for half a second, she basically gets to win neutral. And just sort of the general threat and ability to deny your opponent's options. So like the pinnacle of that, for example, would be a Liz with access to SB Bufu in Awakening. Basically, your opponent has to respect everything you have or read a roll. That's like the optimal neutral tool. Because basically nothing else beats it. And also anti-airs I've included in the neutral section as well, because it's an important part of neutral. Anyway, what else? I suppose I'll address your point quickly, Beef. So a plus super, yes, but there's no situations where it should be plus, I guess, is the point. Unless you're, I suppose, coming in with a safe jump, but even then, because it's a projectile, you can roll it frame 1. So most of the time, it doesn't matter that it's plus. But for example, Labrys gears, it's slightly better because there are more situations where you will have to respect the fact that it's plus. Pressure is the next point. So pressure is basically mix-ups. What sort of mix-ups do you have? How safe are they against reversals? Do you have any true mix options like fuzzies or 50-50s where the opponent just has to respect it, and how often can you get those? Do you have any non-system mechanic options that work? For example, do you have a very strong So for example, like Yosuke can hop into a high, which is very rare. At least into a very quick high, into a first hit high. Do you have a way of dodging stuff? Do you have a way of getting across your opponent? And yeah, also the level of mental stack that you apply with your pressure. So if that pressure leads into very strong hits from a lot of what you're doing, that's very heavy mental stack. Staggers and baits are part of that. It depends on what you get from your stagger. So for example, like Yosuke has excellent stagger, but he just barely gets anything from it. So yes, it's pressure, but it's not that important. But yeah, stagger is just generally very good. But yeah, that's pressure. And the final points, conversion. By conversion, basically, this is where damage comes in, but it's more about how that damage happens. So what you get meterless, what you get using meters options from one more burst. What sort of hits lead to damage? So like if you're throwing a load of fans at someone, but they don't actually convert into anything, that's not going to give you much damage in the long run, even though you're hitting people. How burst safe is your damage? Can you do a lot of it without being in risk of getting bursted? That includes combo rate, due to how OMB works. Do you use poison? Poison is a very big one because it doesn't give you your burst back, and it does a percentage health, and it ignores awakening. Your set play and the sort of strength of your set play is also part of this, because it basically it leads into consistent hits, and what you get from that set play damage as well goes into here. Self-awakening and ability to use the meter and other stuff from awakening also comes into this category. And the final point is tooling. This is mostly a wild card, where I get to shove everything else into it. For the most part, it's the ability to deal with the strongest characters. Do you have anti-Yukari options, or anti-Shadow Naoto options, or anti-Shadow Ken options, effectively? I've spoiled the tier list there, but there you go. Anything special in your kit also that makes you an overall threat that can't be included in this. For example, any unique system mechanics that might not fit into any of these categories. And that is everything, I think. Yeah, so combo rate. Combo rate is to do with the combo system in this game. Basically, the first hit you do does its full damage. Every hit after that is multiplied by a percentage flat, and then proration gets applied. The reason it matters is because if you didn't know, OMB is granted to you based on the base damage of the hits you're doing to your opponent. So the longer into a combo, basically they're still getting the full base damage of the hits you're hitting them with back as their one more burst, into their one more burst gauge. Even though you're not actually doing that full damage. And characters with higher combo rates will basically give you back less burst than the damage you're doing as a percentage compared to those with lower combo rate. So for example, well, it goes between 70 and 60%. So Labrys, for example, has 60%. So they're getting a lot of burst back based on the damage you're doing. And there are some characters with 70%. Let me see if I can remember or get the diagram up quickly. It's in the system mechanics in Dust Loop. No, it isn't. It's in the system data. Sorry. So an example of a character with a 70% combo rate is Junpei, Mitsuru, Akihiko, Yosuke, Yukari, and Yukiko. Yukari being the big one. So like, even though she's doing a ton of damage to you, you don't even get your burst back that quickly. That's what that'll feel like. But yeah, that's that. So let's get into the tier list, starting with the Untouchable tier and the first character in this tier, which is Yukari. No surprises to anyone. Basically, risk reward doesn't exist for her because she can threaten the entire screen with this button here. Jump B, well, combined with a 5B2, but Jump B is the big one because she is also moving at the same time in a direction that you don't know. She's hitting you from full screen. It's an 8-frame startup move, so it's also a great air-to-air. It has ridiculously high hit stun, even non-counter hit, which means you can pick this up and take you full screen and do roughly like 3 to 4K minimum. It's ridiculous. And she has multiple other ways of doing similar things. She doesn't even have to aim at you with these using the Garrett orbs, including with 5B and Jump B. She has other ways to cover the screen. She also has some other ridiculous tools like this thing. It has 15 active frames. It has a ridiculously short startup. It's like, is it 7? I can't remember. Is it 6? And it links into itself. So it's like still active and she can Gatling into itself on whiff, which is absolutely ridiculous. And on any other character will be broken. Yeah, it's 6 frame startup. But yeah, it's nonsense. Like basically everything she has is nonsense. And her set play is amazing. Yeah, it's a 6 frame Junpei. So the pressure, when I say precious, that includes stuff like yeah, I mean, it's one of her weaker aspects I put here because I don't think it is as good as some of what the other nonsense that she has and her neutral. But she has basically you can't react to the 50-50s because she has this thing which Gatlings into itself infinitely, the Junpei, standing low as well, which is both a blessing and a curse in a way, but in general it's good given how oppressive her options are. Yeah, ambiguity is the right word. Yeah, the 50-50s are part of the pressure, I guess is the point. I can't remember exactly which one category I'd said I'd put that in, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I put it in the pressure category. Because yeah, it's basically true 50-50s. But yeah, I mean, it's not the most impossible to deal with, which is why I haven't given it the full thing. And actually, I think there is a point which I forgot to mention. So minimum grade is D-, which is sort of here-ish, and maximum is A+ up here. It's actually a number grade that I've converted into a diagram. And I will, for the most part, have curved things, so at least one character will have received an A+, and one character will have received a D- for each category. So while it might look like I'm being a bit harsh at times, and probably things aren't quite as bad at the bottom end, that is how I have graded it, just for convenience and to be consistent. But yeah, I mean, the story with Yukari isn't really contested by anyone. Conversion should have broken the scale. I mean, yeah, she has 12 here. That's the point. Well, A+, I guess. Yeah, it is the best in the game, to be honest. Yeah, I would give her a 13 if I could, but that's not how I drew the scale. But yeah, what else have I put here? So this is her DP. It is a solid DP, which is why the defense is quite high. Not quite as high as the others, but you know, it moves you away. It is a strike that hits surprisingly high, and baiting it basically requires you to block it. You can jump over it, but you have to be expecting it, and that just gives her a way out with her excellent movement. Yeah, it's just good. Yeah, I'd agree. Liz DP, but good. Yeah, she moves pretty much instantly. It's a strike. Basically, it's Liz DP without the weaknesses of Liz DP. But yeah, I don't think I've included much else here. Yukari, I mean, the Garula, is it Magarula, is just broken as well, although she only has access to it during Awakening with a somewhat low health character. But it normally doesn't matter because you're dead anyway. But yeah, strong character is strong. Not much else to say here. Yeah. We don't like it. I wish it would go away. That's the final words on that one. I know it's the second character on the list. It's Shadow Yukari. Because it's Yukari. Yeah. Basically everything still applies. She uses the benefits of Shadow really well. Just as a brief description, and the only time I will describe this during this video, which is Shadow gets access to Frenzy, which means you lose Gold Burst and Blue Burst, but you get a period of time where you can spend basically as much meter as you want. Chain supers into each other if you're able to do that. You get to jump cancel everything. Yukari tends not to need that, but she is good at spamming specials into each other, which you can also do. Does use it really well. but you lose some of your normal damage. And like I said, loss of gold and blue burst does matter. So yeah, it basically, you lose some consistency, but can kill even more crazily. So I think, yeah, this would be a 14 if I could do that. But and also always has access to Garula, but that's more gimmicky, and you're not going to kill off that from Shadow version anyway because you have lower damage. So not quite as concerned there, but it's still Yukari. That's sort of the bottom line of Shadow. And yeah, that's that. The next character in the list is Shadow Naoto. So Shadow Naoto, Raid and Fate basically means she has the second highest damage in the game after the Yukaris, which is reflected here in the conversion. Yeah, the meter gain is absolutely ridiculous as well. Can auto combo you from her gunshots, which is kind of crazy. And yeah, her combos also last forever, especially if she gets you in the corner. Yeah, remarkably good normals as well. Like, you can see the jump B here, sorry, the 5B here, kind of crazy. Can infinite Gatling Junpei, which is sort of one of the demons of this game. This 2C is absolutely crazy. Like, for how far it goes, it's ridiculously fast. The 5D buff that she got in this version is actually unfair. Like, she just puts something behind you and forces you to block it without you having any counterplay at all. It should not have been able to turn around. Jump C, one of the best air normals in the game. At 12 frames, that's also a high. That also has Persona Invuln, that also goes really far. It's one of the best air normals in the game, if not the best air normal in the game. Yeah, just also really good frame data on everything. Like, it's really tough to break her when she has you in pressure. And yeah, it's just kind of hard to punish her for doing anything. Like, for example, her DP has a mode where she just backdashes. And while there are some characters you can cover both the attack and the backdash, it's just really hard to do. And you have to specifically go for it. It's just, yeah, really good at everything, to be honest. And the shadow mechanic abuse is probably the main reason she's busted, because Raid is busted, and having permanent access to Raid with meter gain basically means that you have no life when fighting her. And yeah, and being able to do that off of one of the better full screen projectiles of the game, basically because you can't punish this. Like, you can't roll it because it hits multiple times. You can't put up walls because it hits multiple times. You can't go over it because you can aim upwards after firing directly at you. There's basically no way of dealing with it, which is the main issue. And if you fully block it, you don't get to move forward. And if you're even in the mid-range, it's actually her turn unless you jump over the ricochet bullet, which is hard to do. Yeah, basically just really good at everything with ridiculous damage. Yeah, it's just, there are very, very few weaknesses in this character. She basically wins at every range, and this isn't even talking about the way that traps work, which is also kind of busted, because she can basically make an area of the screen completely safe, and you have to go and disarm those traps against a character with normals this good, and it's just ridiculous. Baiting the DP, yeah, so baiting the DP basically means you don't set it off, and that's tough to do, but you can punish her. It's not completely unpunishable, and I haven't given her the maximum for defense because, you know, it has weaknesses, but it's still hard to deal with. And a lot of your safe jump options don't work. And having a DP that's immune to safe jumps is just good. So yeah, that's Shadow Naoto. Completely broken. Very nice. Let's move on to one of the other demons of this game that we don't see as much. Not many active ones right now, although we might have one coming back very soon. So Ken and Koromaru, although mostly Koromaru. Very strong walls, very little risk. Most of the risk is taken by the dog, and doing damage to the dog does not kill Ken, which is a problem. And yeah, breaks a lot of standard mechanics of the game. So, for example, being able to attack while rolling makes a lot of... Basically means... Well, he can attack you while being completely invulnerable, which is normally unfair. in a way that's safe. He can also make his own anti-air safe, for example, so like he can jump in with that excellent jump 2B or jump A while you're not able to anti-air him. I suppose that's another point with Yukari. Her arrows aren't anti-airable. But yeah, basically very safe for doing what he's doing. His buttons by himself aren't very good, but like, what's the point? Like, the dog is pretty much always going to be there, even if you kill the dog. Dog will come back eventually, and he has a decent keep away game. He does have a weakness at close range. His DP isn't the most amazing. It is still pretty decent and kind of annoying to punish rather than hard to punish. But if you give him any gaps, the dog can attack you without him having to take any risk, which is kind of good. And he has lots of ways of keeping you at a range that he wants you to be at. For example, this jump A, excellent. This jump 2B, also excellent. Basically just sending the dog and keeping himself safe. And once he hits you, like, it's some of the best set play in the game. That's very flowcharty, but like, even if you know the flowchart, you're not getting out unless you have a very specific option. Yeah, like even as Labrys, I have a decent DP for dealing with him. Like if he gets slightly too close, I can DP him, but that's still really risky. And you're at full range, so are you even going to get anything from any options you do use? So yeah, character's good. Character's very good and uses Shadow very, very well. So he hits very, very hard because he can chain supers easily, even from stuff like DP. And his resource gain is also kind of crazy because even though it's low damage, it gets him to 100 SP very quickly, at which point he just needs to open you up 1 or 2 more times tops. So yeah, very strong character. Again, risk reward just sort of doesn't make sense, which is the main theme for a lot of these top tiers. And yeah, character is good. And that sort of takes us to the Untouchable tier, and I guess brings me to the main point of how these tiers are ordered. So when it comes to tiers, I've gone over what each tier means, but the placement within the tier doesn't mean I think X character is better than Y, mostly because I don't think that makes sense as a way of comparing, because it's quite a complex game. You'll have lots of different interactions. What a tier placement will mean is it's a rough guess at the matchup spread that character faces, combined with how consistent I think that character will be in a tournament setting. So basically means I think a Yukari will perform slightly more consistently well over a Shadow Naoto. Maybe not by much, but again, just a rough estimate, and I don't think you should read super much into exactly where a character is placed within a tier. So for example, I don't think you should say, he thinks Shadow Ken is top 4. It's just Shadow Ken is untouchable. But I think maybe one of the less consistent untouchable characters, for example. And for example, like the second character here, you shouldn't say they're top 6. They are just a consistent competitive character when discussing this sort of thing. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I forgot. Anyway. So yeah, that rounds out the Untouchable tier. I don't think there's anything too conspicuous here that anyone would massively disagree with. So let us move on to the competitive tier. It's Naoto again. Hello, Naoto. So yeah, main point, Shadow Naoto, but less meter and less access to Raid. Raid being the main broken tool on Naoto. For those who don't know, Raid, the main buff to Raid in this version is that it takes 2 fate instead of 1 per fate shot, which was a big mistake because it's very easy to lose the first 3 fate and then you get SB raided and you die. But yeah, normal Naoto gets less access to that, which is good. And on a lower health character means you can sometimes prevent it from happening. Raid is still very good. She still has Raid, but less often. Other than that, no major differences. It's just sort of, less consistent damage, effectively. Still a very good character in pretty much every aspect. The auto combo difference as well, I forgot to mention that in the differences of Shadows. She has a low 5 AA, which can be jump cancelled from, which is kind of broken, to be honest. It's just like visually and mentally very hard to deal with. And we'll also do slightly higher like average damage to you than normal Naoto. Than Shadow Naoto, but you know, without that threat of raid, it's not as bad. Still extremely strong, which is why I've put her up here, and I think very consistent if played well. But yeah, not much more to say on that one because we've already covered the Shadow. This one is interesting and is probably one of my slightly more controversial placings, at least. Like I said, shouldn't think of her as top 6. You should just think of her as a consistent competitive character. Margaret has a lot of very good set play, and her mix-ups have very, very high reward for how good they are. And she basically has a way to deal with you no matter where you are on the screen. Yeah, it's... So let's look at some of these tools, for example. Like that jump C is incredible, 13 frames for an excellent Persona hitbox with Persona involved, with a decent confirm off of it. This thing is an absolutely ridiculous tool that is both plus and an air, like an anti-air that fatals. Like why? Why does this exist? Excellent 5C, excellent fireballs. Power slash makes her defense actually pretty okay. Again, one of her weaker points I put here, but she has a lot of options. Like even the 2A, it reaches really far. It's low. The DP is weak, but being immune to safe jumps, or at least forcing people into hit stop OSs, is still decent. Like, it's not character crippling. It has fatal recovery, yes, which is quite bad, but yeah, because they can't just block it into a fatal counter of their choice, it's not the end of the world most of the time. But yeah, lots of really good Persona buttons. 8 cards, like, even if you're beating her at every turn, it takes you a long time to disable her Persona. Like, once it's disabled, sure, she's kind of weak, but yeah, it takes forever. You have to win so many engagements. And it's just really hard to deal with her pressure. So she is the person I've given the A+ to in terms of pressure. Like, it is both ranged, it hits you everywhere. It's very easy for her to get in and out of it. It's on the slower side, but like I said, it's normally ranged enough that a lot of characters can't do anything to it. And it's just visually very difficult, mostly because of stuff like this and the cancels that she gets. Like the reverse beat stuff she can do as well is also really difficult to understand, just visually. And even her non-Persona normals, like I said, this 2A, this jump B, this jump 2B, really quite good. So a character with a lot of options, it all works really well. Yeah, strong character. Not much more to say on that. Here's normal Ken. Basically, worst Shadow Ken. Worst resource gain. Can't use meter quite as well. You can actually, you live long enough to exploit his weaknesses, which he does have. Because you can get close to him sometimes. And basically, you can contest him without fear of just instantly dying to a frenzy combo. Which makes him not as good, and why he has fallen from Untouchable to competitive tier. I still think he is very good for all the reasons mentioned before, but not quite as good. Short and simple. And Shadow Mitsuru. Shadow Mitsuru was set to be the demon of this version. I don't think it's quite materialized for a couple of reasons. Like, yes, she has that amazing meter gain that a lot of the other ones had, and is able to... Well, her frenzy is what's one of the best in the game. This conversion is at 12, A+, but she does have to put herself at risk to do a lot of what she does. So she pokes you, but you can poke her back. And the pokes aren't that fast for where they go, relatively. Lots of chest attribute stuff, lots of stuff where she has lots of recovery. Coup is a very good move, but it has counterplay. If you shove a projectile out there, if you jump over it, if you attack back into that space before she even gets going, it's risky. It has barely any recovery to hit her after the fact, but you know, you can contest it, which is more than could be said for some other full screen tools. She has decent other aspects to her, and in general her matchup spread is good, which is why she is as high as she is for the most part. She doesn't have many major weaknesses, and she does well against some other characters. So, solid character, but not as threatening as I think she was lined up to be when the patch dropped. And yeah, that's S.Mitsuru. Liz, again, is probably one of my more controversial takes. I am not going to spend 40 minutes on Liz today, because we do not have time. I'm already 1 hour in. But I will go through my points. Some of the best tools in the game in terms of lots of unique stuff, which, while on the surface seems gimmicky, can be made consistent when used correctly. Especially in Awakening, she is probably, in my opinion, the strongest character in Awakening. Well, she is. If it was just Awakening Liz, I would put her in a untouchable tier, and she can get there somewhat consistently. No, sadly, no 2 hour Liz rage. But yeah, I think Awakening Liz is one of the characters who she forces you to down back, and you basically lost neutral just by Liz existing. And in terms of other tools that she has that no one else has, so Invigorate, basically giving her SP for existing. Some of the best self-awakening tools in the game. Some interesting, like even her instant kill is actually usable, which is unique for a character. But yeah, she had so many good buffs in 2.5. Her health being one of the big ones. 8 to 8.5k is absolutely huge when you factor in Awakening, which she gets to really often. So her health isn't actually that low relative to a lot of the cast in practical terms, because she reaches full Awakening health way more often than everyone else in the game. But yeah, really quite good, and uses status ailments really, really well. Fear, one of the strongest status ailments in the game. But yeah. And yeah, in terms of self-awakening, yes, it's Mind Charge. Mind Charge is just very good. Free pause button, where you get to see what's going on, and you enter full awakening health. I think more Liz players should use B Mind Charge, but maybe there's only certain matchups where that makes sense. Yeah, just very good. Status ailments, like I said, Charm. The charm on the DP is extremely strong. You can think of it as an 80 SP meter swing, because your opponent loses 40 and you gain 40 when a character is already gaining meter. So basically, you see a lot of Liz players on full SP at 15 seconds into the game. And I don't know about you, but that's really quite strong. What else? She has, yeah, the paralysis, she has the fear. And the confused and other things aren't as bad. Poison is probably the biggest one. Doing a lot of her damage through poison basically means that you don't get your burst back. Not that you can burst her at most of the time anyway, but yeah, really strong poison. The main weakness being that she does struggle against some stronger characters. So most of the untouchable tier, and for example, Mitsuru, which you do see a decent amount of, she does struggle against because they have the tools needed to beat her. They're very much a character where if you don't have the tools to deal with her options, you are just dead. But yeah, overall, just really strong ability to turn whatever she has, which she gains, yeah, just by existing, into a kill. Also highlighted some interesting points here. So this 5A is absolutely ridiculous, both because visually, like, why does it here? And also, it has a really low recovery. It's one of the lowest recovery 5As for the long-range 5As. Oh, what is NBM going to say? I could not include the effect. Yeah, true. Okay, so it will, the shiny card bit will go slightly further. But yeah, it is an incredibly good 5A. Like, the recovery is so low that it is nearly unpunishable. At 21 frames of recovery. It is just spammable. The 2B, one of the best 2Bs in the game, if not the best 2B in the game. which is also one of the best matches in the game because it beats practically every option you can choose on offense apart from ranging someone out or blocking outside of range, and really good confirms. 5C is a strong option. It can be rolled, but the requirement to roll it and successfully punish is almost absurd. So if someone isn't just spamming it in an obvious way, it is just really, really hard to roll. And yeah, if you get it wrong, you just die. That's one of the main issues with 5C. Like, it isn't that crazy in terms of that first hit, but getting it wrong means you die. And that's really, really... It basically means you don't roll it consistently every time. Despite what some players might say. Not talking about UNBM. But yeah, that's that. Jump C is also just a very strong air move and confirms a lot from other moves. And yeah, beats a lot of stuff, and she can spam it on the way down due to the way the stuff works. And I suppose another thing with Liz is just a lot of her movement's very strange. I didn't include Jump B here. It is an excellent move that is both an air to ground and an anti-air due to how it stops her in the air and the range it has. It's hard to confirm from, but strong Liz players, such as NVM, will use it perfectly and make it use both. Basically, let it act as both an air to ground and an anti-air. And that's Bufu. I don't need to talk about Bufu, especially in Awakening. Well, basically only in Awakening, to be honest. A full screen air unblockable, that kills you. Yeah. It is probably the most broken neutral tool in the game. And yeah, you have to roll it or just down back. Like, you get punished for doing anything while there's an Awakening, and that's just sad. Yeah, the most neutral move in the game. Yep, true. And yeah, Air Garudine. I do not smoke NBA, especially not on Liz. We go pretty even. Yeah, we have some good games. Garudine is underrated, and I think partially because for some reason the tech hasn't caught on yet. It's the NBM special where if you maneuver Garudine in the correct way, it is up to +7 or +5, I think, on a standing opponent. People still want more cancel from this. I don't know why. I don't know why this tech hasn't permeated all the Liz players, but there you go. And yeah, and the Zeo just hitting full screen as a physical and projectile is just good. It is one of the better full screen projectile moves, and even if you block it, you gain about 1 or 2 steps on Liz. I think it's really strong. You have to super jump it, and it's quite hard to super jump given how high it hits. And even if you do, it's not always a perfect punish unless you have a very good air normal. So yeah, I think character just does really, really well and threatens the entire screen a lot of the time in Awakening, and has lots of ways of getting Awakening. So strong character in my opinion. I think is competitive. I don't think is as weak as some people say. Partially, mostly due to the buffs. Like, I think people are still thinking in terms of 1.1 as to how weak she was. Like I said, I have a lot of experience facing Liz in 1.1 and vanilla, and she is a completely different beast. Completely different. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. We have escaped the Liz dungeon, and we will move on to S.Chie, the somewhat underrepresented monster of this version. Basically represents everything wrong with Shadow. Can kill you from practically any hit once she has the full stick of butter ready. Also has surprisingly good stagger and set play. So she will normally get a hit in you at some point, which is what kind of makes this character strong. She does have to work in neutral though. Some of her tools have got a lot better. This Jump C is kind of crazy. It's not head attribute, so you can't anti-air it. And it has Persona Invul, and it's really fast, and she can spam it on the way down. The 5C and the 2C are both pretty decent now. Again, due to the persona invuln and them being fast, she doesn't get too much off of it, apart from, you know, being the shadow from Frenzy. And I have included grab here because she can kill you from a grab as well, which is kind of crazy, because that shouldn't be possible. Yeah, true, actually. She does only need part of it. She doesn't even need 100 SP to kill you. That's how quick she kills you. Basically, Shadow is broken on Chie. So it basically allows her to convert pretty much any hit into a kill. And with decent pressure, she probably will get that hit. She has some nice stuff with 5D. This is Black Spot. It's decent as another way of getting that hit or fataling you. So yeah, character's okay, but just sort of lacks in most other areas. But it doesn't matter if she kills you off of a random hit anyway, which is why I have her in this tier. That Shadow Chie. Let us hope we never find him. Next pot is S.Aigis. Now S.Aigis, I'm hoping most people agree with me putting S.Aigis here. So within Orgear, S.Aigis has probably some of the best set play in the game. This is shown by the high pressure score here. But in my opinion, she does actually have to work quite a bit harder than a lot of other characters in this tier to get things started, including managing Orgear, because Orgear has some downsides. Namely, she is pretty bad outside of Orgear, and she can get overheated in a way that isn't too hard to do. Getting in and out of Orgear isn't that easy. I mean, the biggest buff that she got this version is the ability to switch modes mid-combo as easily as she does now. So that 2C buff, that's one of the main reasons 2C is here, because it's allowing her to do that, and that's absolutely huge. But she does have a decent amount of counterplay, given how straightforward she is for the most part, if she's not already hitting you. If she's flying at you, it's extremely simple movement, so it's not terribly hard to put something in the way of that. And yeah, she has a lot of decent stuff, so sweep goes quite far for what it does. Jump C, this is the Jump C. It is 8 frames, but it isn't that good as an air to ground. It's mostly good as an air to air. And it is probably one of the best air to air moves in the game. But again, being only air to air means it isn't as strong as some other characters with good air normals. And it's not the worst to beat either, because it hits so fast. You actually have to do it quite late into your jumps. So, like, she's not commonly instant air dash jump seeing you. It's a thing that can happen, but it doesn't happen that often, to be honest. Bullets is good. The buff to bullets is very good. Being able to fall while doing this basically makes it really, really hard to punish. Yeah. In my opinion, character is good, but not unbeatable, and I think people need to spend a little bit more time labbing how to deal with her. Because a lot of the time, you'll see S.Aigis players relying on 2B to try and get into Orgear, and that is very punishable if you are sitting in the right range. But yeah, character is consistent and good, which is why she is in this tier, but not quite the monster I think some people think she is. And that comes with probably the most experience in the world of this character. Which means I also know how to deal with her, but, you know, I will still use to D-star a lot of the time. And I will start dooming as well. But, yeah, there you go. That's S.Aigis. This is Shadow S.Aigis, Spicy S.Aigis. Basically just does her damage slightly differently. I wouldn't say is significantly different. Still kind of opens you up in the same way, has the same game plan. Yeah, not really much to say here, apart from is a shadow version of S.Aigis. And I don't like the inconsistency of shadows in tournament, to be honest. So, yeah, I don't think as good as S.Aigis, but I think it's still S.Aigis. And because she still plays like S.Aigis, I put her roughly in the same place. Having some stuff that is completely unburstable is good too, although most of S.Aigis' stuff is unburstable anyway. But at least having no points is worse. is better than having 1 point. And you know, she can do some funky stuff with the supers, given that she has meterless super links. But yeah, that's spicy, I guess. Here's Shadow Yukiko. Now, Shadow Yukiko is interesting because we don't see much of her. And in my opinion, is weak in a lot of aspects, but Frenzy is absolutely broken on her because a lot of her character is, I'm going to do a lot of harmless hits on you and hope you die eventually. But, you know, Frenzy basically means she can turn any single one of those hits into a kill, including unblockable stuff. Basically all the stuff that's made to balance it, she gets to ignore with Frenzy. So like, being able to boost her fire level to get access to some of her stronger moves. Being able to chain supers. And just sort of killing you off of any hit. So, uses Frenzy extremely well, but other than that, isn't actually that scary. But, you know, all she needs is one hit, right? So, yeah, and she has some decent stuff too. Her fan buffs were really nice for her. Gets her that meter, gets her that space that she needs to get going. Some decent... The jump C is decent now. She can do some stuff from it, although not too much, to be honest. Well, I've seen some Yukikos do some air-to-ground stuff with the air moves, which is quite impressive. Decent DP as well. It's just kind of awkward to deal with because it's armor, but you get no hit stop. So it can be dealt with. It's just really strange. And it absorbs projectiles, I think, and heals her. So yeah, just really strange character that we don't see much of, but I think is kind of crazy in how she converts hits. Some sort of similar with Shadow Yosuke, which is strong on, well, kind of the opposite actually. So he's strong on a lot of aspects. So he has crazy neutral, some of the best movement in the game. His mix-up options are generally quite good, if a little bit gimmicky, but it's kind of hard to deal with those gimmicks. Like even if you know it's coming, it's just really awkward to punish. And once he builds his resources, it does take a while for him to do that, like at least 2 or 3 hits. He can kill you from roughly half health, and it's via poison, which, as mentioned before, is very strong. Yeah, just really hard to pin down if you can't wall the screen really well. Some characters can wall the screen, and a lot of the stronger characters can wall the screen, but if you can't, you're kind of done for. So this is his 5A, kind of works in tandem with his ridiculous dash speeds. He can 5A you from half screen effectively, which is kind of crazy. Really good 2B, hits both sides. 5C, almost unpunishable if you roll it. Yeah, excellent mash, excellent... Oh, pretty good DP. This jump C is actually crazy and I think kind of underrated because it just lasts forever, so you can just throw it out there. And it's incredibly plus. And yeah, it just does a lot of things. Yeah, very strong character, mostly due to Frenzy in terms of getting his kills. Yeah, good character. Minazuki is a solid all-rounder. We don't see too much of him in tournament, but I think we will soon as we get more and more beginners come in and pick him up. Sort of just, yeah, does a lot of things very well. Never really the best at anything, but has some kind of crazy payoffs for a lot of buttons users often. So that 5C, having the invuln on it and basically allowing him to do roughly 5k on counter hit. Really quite good. And also some decent answers to some other top tiers. So for example, if you really hate S.Aigis, you can play Minazuki and just kill her for trying anything. And just, yeah, the jump 2D appearing and killing people is just nice. Being able to teleport on top of other people as well, really nice. And counter option to a lot of the high tiers and what they have. The main issue in my eyes is that he's just a little bit too straightforward. If he's not throwing one of those buttons on you, he doesn't really have too much apart from just sort of jumping at you with jump B. It is a good jump B, but can be kind of hard to confirm at times. And a lot of his pressure requires him to take risks to actually open you up. So he does have a command grab, but he has to walk up to you and it has no invuln on it. And a lot of his persona normals, what he's throwing out, are on the slower side. So, yeah, good character. I think very consistent. Belongs in this tier, but not quite up there with the rest. Here we come to Marie. Mostly pioneered by NBM at this point, but has a lot going for her, and I think deserves a spot in the competitive tier. One of the better DPs in the game, and is actually the character I gave a 12 on defense to, just because so many good defensive options. Very hard to punish, even if you know what's coming. And yeah, also does a lot of damage from those defensive options. And yeah, just converts hits very well based on what she's doing. This jump B being the main culprit, it basically has the hit stun of a fatal counter on counter hit. Absolutely crazy. And also just a lot of very good normals combined with crazy dash acceleration. So yeah, really fast. A-lethal. Yeah, that dash acceleration is the fastest in the game, and basically means that all of her grounded normals can hit really far if she wants them to. This 5B kind of being criminal as well, being a move that you have to sweep under, but also jumps over sweeps. So can be beaten by sweeps, but it's kind of shaky. And also just hits really far. Really good 2B with basically no recovery on it, so you can't bait it. Like I said, this jump B is crazy and leads into ridiculous damage on hit, on counter hit, even on non-counter hit, to be honest. And also reverse beats into jump 2B, I think. Well, cancels into jump 2B or vice versa, I can't remember. For lots of double overheads. Some really nice persona normals, including jump D being kind of crazy in the area it covers. If you don't move around it perfectly, you are liable to lose neutral. And yeah, if you leave her alone for a couple seconds, you also lose neutral due to presence, so you can't leave her alone. You have to be moving into her, otherwise you will get hit at some point. Yeah, I think that is mostly it. So yeah, very strong character. Then we move on to S.Labrys. So Shadow is this competitive? Yes, this is still competitive tier. So I will let you know once we've changed tiers. I will do a little tier roundup at the end of each one. So now we've moved on to S.Labrys. Her main role is an anti-Yukari / Naoto. Not as good as Naoto, but yeah, anti-Yukari tool, which gives her the really high tooling rating. But actually not that impressive otherwise, in my opinion. Like, she has some cool stuff. Once you learn the answers to the unblockables, it's basically like a semi 50-50 where you can guarantee not getting hit too hard if you want. And actually has some weaknesses to some of the other DPs and reversal options in the game anyway. And sort of the base character I wouldn't say is that strong. Gimmicky stuff. Jump 2B is 13 frames and hits really far for what it does. So it is a very good air-to-air and a decent-ish air-to-ground, although the way she jumps, it's not actually that good air-to-ground. The 2C is just a very strong threat that you can put out there and almost forced when neutral if your opponent isn't careful about it. There are ways to play around it. The tracking isn't perfect, and you can stop it from coming out sometimes, although not consistently. Very good overhead, which can be confirmed, although it does require you to send the persona out specifically to do so, which can be predictable. And Titano is just a neutral skip, although, again, not a perfect one. You can get thrown out of it. But yeah, character's okay, but the main issue is 8,000 health is not enough health in this game. And the main issue is a lot of characters are doing a lot more damage consistently in this version than they used to. So it's really a very big liability in this version. So, and also has some of the... She has some okay reversal options, like the TV punch is okay, it's just kind of slow. Her DP is awful, it's one of the worst in the game. Mostly because it is armor with full hit stun, and 13 frames is quite slow. And it doesn't really hit very much of the screen anyway, so... really bad reverse defense options on a character with no health, which is kind of part of defense as well. Like how many times you can get hit is part of everything. So yeah, just has a very special niche, and I don't think is as consistent. Although, like I said, because of that niche, makes her competitive in my eyes. Like as long as you are good enough to beat everyone else, you now actually have a decent shot at the untouchable tier. So deserves a place in competitive in my eyes, but only just. And speaking of, only just is exactly right, because that is the end of the competitive tier, and I don't think there's much here that most people argue with. Maybe one or two. The Velvet Remembers, probably. And yeah, Marie is probably the newer entry into this, but that's because she was basically pioneered more recently. Has a lot better confirms than she used to. Like, consistent damage used to be an issue for her, but it no longer is. Where is he? He being Narukami, I am guessing, which brings us into the strong plus outclassed tier in my opinion. And this probably is going to be a little bit controversial, because this is where Narukami lives in my eyes. I think he does a lot of things decently. But I don't think he is as scary as some people might say. Like, he has... Like, if you are outplaying your opponent, you will probably win. But only if you are outplaying your opponent. Like, at full screen, he holds effectively no threat. Like, even if you get hit by a Zio, you don't particularly care. You might get you might get pressured, but again, whatever. He is forced to come to you. And that is, in general, a weakness in this game. Like, being forced to move into your opponent is a liability. And he does it decently, but not the best in the game in my eyes. And he is quite reliant on resources to really convert. I mean, once he does get those resources, yes, he converts really quite strong. But without them, like, if you DP in Narukami and he doesn't have meter or a burst, he's not going to do much to you. Like, there's not much threat there. And if Narukami's at full screen, you can pretty much guarantee he's either going to Zio or run at you, which is kind of a weak game plan in my eyes. So yeah, without being a proper threat, I don't think there's that much. Like, once he is on top of you, yes, he is terrifying. But so that's kind of like the strongest grade I gave him here was this A- for pressure. And the reason it's A-, again, because it requires the resources to actually kill you. And you're not that scared of a lot of stuff, and a lot of the stuff that will open you up can be DP'd. But it is very strong stagger in general. But yeah, I don't know. It just feels slightly too fair in my eyes to be really up there in the competitive tier. I think a Narukami player has to work a decent amount harder than most of the other characters I have already mentioned to get his kills. Maybe not to open people up, but to get those kills. I think he does have to work quite hard. But yeah, that is Narukami. And here is normal Mitsuru. Has to hit you a lot more times than Shadow does. And doesn't gain the crazy resources. And yeah, basically, her weaknesses now become exploitable. Because against Shadow, it doesn't matter that she has weaknesses, because she just kills you before you even have a chance to exploit them. But now you can start sweeping under her stuff. Like, you're not that scared of dying. Like, maybe she'll 5v you, but not all the time. Her 5A tags no longer do 8k to you. They do about 1 or 2k. Yeah, just that inability to convert quite as well is a really big hit to her kit. And yeah, just a lot of risks she has to take to actually open you up and then kill you. So I think still a decent character, and the poking will still be very effective against a lot of the cast, but it's no longer as big of a threat. And, you know, the defense that she has isn't that amazing. Like, she has a DP that hits everywhere, but it is punishable on block without risk of super RPS, if you want to. And yeah, it's just not quite there in my eyes. Like, a lot of her pressure is just poking you with mids. And some of the most common mid strings that they use are actually easily exploitable if you know what to do. So, yeah, decent character, but I think outclassed by most of the rest of the cast. Yeah, that's Mitsuru. Here is Adachi. Now, Adachi I have lots of different thoughts about from time to time. Like, the mid-range monster, so this Jump C and this 5C are absolutely crazy in terms of their reach and what they do to you and what they can lead into. But, and mostly because of how he uses meter, like, his buffs are incredibly strong. But he tends to have to take a decent amount of risks to get to you. Like, his main game plan is trying to use one of Jump C or Jump 2D to try and kill you. But Jump 2D is actually head attribute, so you can 2B both versions if you 2B at the right time, although you do have to do 2B quite early to deal with this. But yeah, like, to open you up as well, he does tend to have to take risks. His command grab doesn't have invuln on it. He doesn't have a low apart from sweep. He does, like, his DP is good, but it's a DP. If it gets blocked, you die. He does have a decent super cancel, but yeah, it's just lots of risks that he has to take to try and open you up. And once he gets going, yes, he is crazy, and his defense is very strong insofar as the options themselves aren't good, but he has so many of them, and if you get hit by them, he is probably getting at least one of his buffs and a decent knockdown, so it's decent. Gunshot is stronger than it used to be. It's still somewhat of a gimmick, and SB Gunshot is also very strong as a neutral option, but I think character is good, but I think there are better consistent options that would serve you better in a tournament, just because he has to take that many risks to try and kill someone. So that is Adachi. And yeah, just I suppose I should make a big point about this Jump C. This Jump C is crazy. It hits everywhere, it's 13 frames, it's basically uncontestable. Jump C is one of the craziest moves in the game, but it's part of a slightly weaker game plan overall, in my opinion. Moving on to Rise, probably again slightly controversial, but I think given what I have seen of her set play and her ability to sort of win neutral if you leave her alone, yeah, very strong character. I think she performs extremely weakly against some of the top tiers, which is why the tooling is so low. Like, she has a lot of good tools, but they just don't work where she needs them to. But yeah, really, really good set play. Really hard to pass what she's actually doing to you. And also some really good buttons up close too. I don't know if you've fought a Rise recently, but this Jump B is absolutely insane. It lasts forever, it's really fast, and it confirms into a decent amount as well. And she gets to rebeat into another high at any point, which is crazy. And a few other decent options. So Jump C, she can now basically spam infinitely with the Persona invuln as well. The Jump D is just good. This is basically how she wins neutral if you leave her alone for too long, as well as the Arrow Rain, which is the lasers. Both good. Both have somewhat of an answer to them, but they're just really hard to do. And this thing is absolute nonsense. I wish it would go away. I'm happy it has a timer on it, because otherwise they would probably just spam it. The orbs are too good. But other than that, she just sort of takes a little bit too long to kill. Like, her damage is decent-ish with meter, but she has to hit you quite a few times and then liable to get bursted. And the damage sort of takes a while to come out as well, and you do get burst back with time. So yeah, it's just decent character, but again, sort of outclassed based on how she does her damage. I think the set play has a lot of potential to take her far, but she's not supported by what the reward once that set play hits, in my opinion. Shadow Junpei. Shadow Junpei is an interesting character because it is Junpei with permanent victory cry, effectively, at the cost of an immediate frenzy, which is a cost and it's significant. And Victory Cry Junpei is good. Like, he is good insofar as if he opens you up, and he has some decent ways of doing that in neutral, but it's still kind of very plain. He still has to sort of run up and hit you, which in Persona is quite weak. Yeah, it's kind of meh, but does decent damage, does excellent meter gain. Not the best at spending that meter, but the rest of the combo does its job. And Junpei as a whole has some decently nice options. I think he has a 5-frame 5A, which is kind of crazy. This jump B is good. Do not underestimate this jump B. It is competitive, but it is still just a standard jump B where he runs at you. This 5C is absolutely crazy, but it does have its risks if you have against an opponent who can attack into that range faster than he can. Because it's slow, but it covers a lot of range for a very long time. And Deathbound is probably the saving grace of Junpei in general. Being able to hit someone from anywhere on the screen is strong. And it means he isn't completely shut out by some of the stronger characters, which is why tooling is decent. But yeah, just a character who uses frenzy well, and yeah, Victory Cry is decent for him. It doesn't do too much apart from just making it hit stronger. Like the other buffs are okay, but they're not game changing. And that's kind of the main reason I have his neutral solo. There's it's still just very straightforward and not that oppressive in my eyes. Like it's good, but it's just not quite there. Here is Shadow Narukami, which is Narukami, but inconsistent in my eyes. Like why would you lose the inconsistency? He loses one more burst, and one more burst is very good for Narukami. Gets the frenzy instead, but you have to use it as frenzy. You don't get gold burst, you don't get blue burst really as much. Yeah, basically just doesn't quite do enough. And I think the average damage of Narukami in the corner or from his other stuff is important to him. So yeah, in my eyes, not it, and probably the worst version. And that is it. There's not actually that many characters here. I think anyone in this character is still going to do decently if you take them into a tournament. But again, you might want to consider shifting them up if there's a different type of your character in here. But yeah, characters that will have to work, I think. Now we move on to the can be made to work tier. So again, characters where I think you are going to have to try very hard to make them deal with what everyone else has to offer. Starting with Kanji. Now, this is probably slightly lower than I had him previously. I think he has a lot of very good tools and was one of the biggest winners of the patch. And a lot of people sleep on exactly what he can do. Like, the main thing holding him back is the very disadvantaged matchups he has against some of the stronger characters, and that's just a tournament killer. I don't think it's as bad as some people say. Like, he has some decent tooling. For example, Primal Force is very good at dealing with projectiles. One of the best tools in the game at dealing with projectiles. And yeah, even though he's a grappler, he has lots of good ranged tools. Like, the 5C buff was huge for him. He gets a lot from it too on counter hit. 5D is an incredible ranged tool that walls off a lot of the screen and can test stuff, and is an amazing Oki tool as well. Like, yes, you can backdash, but you have to backdash very specifically, and it's not necessarily safe to do so. Yeah, zoning grappler. Like, Kanji's zoning tools in this version are good enough that you have to come to him if you are not also a zoner, which fundamentally breaks one of the main weaknesses of grapplers, which is you have to move. And like, who cares if he has poor movement if Takumi Mikazuchi's doing it for him, or he doesn't have to move because you're coming to him. Jump C is now a lot stronger than it used to be given the Persona info. And like, if you're coming to him as well in the air, it's a very good move. Even though you're not going to get much from it, as an air to air, it still hits them and they're in a bad position. His jump B is actually incredible. To those who don't know, it is more disjointed than Labrys jump B. And he has a very, very fast, it doesn't take him far, but it is fast, air dash. So if he does a low air dash jump B, it goes surprisingly far, and it is as reactable as a lot of other jump Bs. So yeah, it's good. yeah, forces half the advantage RPS, so a lot of his pressure is also very good because it is invuln command grabs, which most of the cast don't have. As well as some pretty decent pressure. It's just hard to react to. A 5B with no hit stop. A decent 5A that leads into decent combos. And his combos in this version are also extremely good. His use of one more burst is incredible. And a lot of his hits, that fatal counter, for example 2C or jump C, do ridiculous damage, meterless even. And yeah, a lot of his supers, like his chair super has, I think, 150 proration, which is basically just a normal. And that's absolutely crazy. Yes, you have to spend burst to do it, but you can do it most of the time. Yeah, just really, really strong damage in this version. Not every hit will do it, but given how you have to move to deal with Kanji, like he is getting those hits. And yeah, just very strong. And defense, I have him at an A mostly because of this thing, which is an anti-everything. So no matter where you're hitting him from, if you are physically hitting him, he hits you. It also has a hitbox, so even if you block it, you then have to deal with super RPS. Even if you hit it with a persona, I think it can still break that persona, so you still have to figure out how you're going to hit him after the fact. There's fatal counter recovery, and he stays on the ground, so it is somewhat exploitable, but it's just really, really good. And just the monster of super command grab, which is 0 after flash. So basically he can deal 4,000 damage to you, over 4,000 damage to you for blocking, which is just ridiculous. So that's kind of what I mean by advantaged RPS. Like, yes, you kind of have to jump before knowing anything, and if you don't, you might just die for it. So decent character, but because of his weak matchups in some circumstances, not quite up there with the rest. Really solid tools though, and I think people need to stop memeing on him. Here is normal Chie, basically a Chie who actually has to play the game, and the weaknesses matter because she doesn't kill you immediately. Like, she has some decent conversions, but isn't actually going to one-shot you. And once the match lasts long enough, the mediocre neutral is going to start taking a toll, and she's going to get tagged and put in a bad situation. So yeah, basically, why would you ever play normal Chie when Shadow exists? Because you're playing too much of the game, and if you want to win, you don't want to play the game. It's kind of how it works. But yeah. Here is Shadow Kanji. I think the main point with Shadow Kanji is basically he gets some more stuff of his ranged hits, so he can kill you off of Primal Force much more easily. But otherwise just sort of less consistent on a character with consistency issues, so I don't see him being quite as strong, at least as a tournament pick. The main thing also is he always has this super, and that's dangerous, but yeah, it's more of a mental damage thing than anything else. Character is probably, yeah, he's okay, but I don't see why you would pick him over normal, in my eyes. Like, the one more burst on normal is also kind of crazy. Here is normal Yosuke, which is, yeah, basically, he gets the hits, but then what's he going to do to you? Like, you have to win far more engagements than you want to on any character. Like, even though he has some of the best tools in the game to do so. And yeah, if you roll the dice enough times, which is basically run your pressure or try and open something up, eventually you lose. And that's the issue. Like, he has some okay stuff, but the damage just isn't there. And at some point you're going to get hit. So yeah, it's just not quite good enough in my eyes. Not much more to say on that. Normal Teddie. Character has a lot of history. A lot of history. Used to be one of the strongest characters in the game. Did get hit very, very significantly by a lot of nerfs, but has kept some of his good stuff. Buckets and Oil Drum are still broken. His Jump B is still incredibly strong. His 5B is, I think as strong as it was, if not better, because of the repeat options, although that doesn't tend to get used all too much. SBTV is one of the most ignorant buttons in the game, fataling people from anywhere on the screen pretty much instantly. It's kind of crazy, and actually keeps him in decent contention even against zoners. The main issue with his nerfs is that, it's made there be counterplay to his items. Like, the main reason he was strong is that if you threw an item out, Teddie had basically one neutral for a short period of time, or at least around the item that has been thrown out. That is no longer the case. You can destroy a lot of items as they're being thrown out, or there is at least some counterplay to some of them. And a lot of his other buttons got nerfed too. He has some decently nice stuff. He does have small amounts of poison. He has some rage stuff, but it's slightly more gimmicky than it needs to be a consistently strong character in my eyes. Obviously, Joey has shown that this character can go far in the right hands, but that is mostly due to the player rather than the character doing anything specifically. I will say that a lot of the community aren't playing exactly correctly against Teddie. Like, you do have to be a lot more aggressive against the item throws and attack into them and lab your answers to each item. Because some of them can only be destroyed as they're being thrown, for example, and react in specific ways. But yeah, character's okay. I don't think necessarily too weak, and has retained a lot of competitive stuff, just lacks that sort of bite. And yeah, the damage is just generally low unless in the corner, and even then not as strong as other characters in the corner. So good character, but not quite there. Here is Shabrys. I think she just doesn't use Frenzy well. It's still decent in terms of set play and pressure, but Shadow basically just doesn't work with her that well as far as I understand, which isn't much, but I don't. So there we go. Somewhat unknown though. We haven't seen many people lab her too hard. I think I've heard of some people trying to, but I've never seen it in practice, so I can't say. Yeah, Rise but takes 3 more hits might be a good summary of the character, maybe. We haven't seen her, so who knows, but there we go. Here is normal Junpei. Basically, victory cryless Junpei, because he cannot reliably do that. I mean, he can, but why? Why would you take the risk? And the loss of the increased average damage is nice once he reaches victory cry, but I don't think it's worth losing the guaranteed opportunity to reach it. Yeah. And his damage is also done kind of quite slowly, and it isn't burst safe. So yeah, it's not great. He's just kind of mediocre all around, to be honest. And that's not good enough. Not in this game. But yeah, here is normal Yukiko. So yeah, gives you lots of paper cuts but doesn't kill you, which is kind of the main problem, especially for a character who doesn't have that much health. Has some interesting stuff once she reaches Awakening or manages to get Firebird online, but just struggles to do any of that, which is the problem. Yeah, just not quite enough, and the loss of Frenzy hurts her really, really bad, because I don't think she uses One More Burst that well either. So yeah, just kind of built for Frenzy, to be honest. Which, when you don't have Frenzy, is not good. Here is normal Show. So Show actually has quite an impressive range of tools. Impressive range, but the tools themselves aren't that impressive. So the dodge, for example, is kind of weird to deal with, especially for a slower character. But just sort of, once he gets a hit using those tools, you have to spend far too much to actually get decent damage. The average damage is okay, but at some point, if you take enough risks, you die for it. And he has very low health as well, so dies. Hey Pika, good to see you. Yeah, just sort of not really special enough and doesn't do enough to be a major threat. And that is Show. Yeah, we got the Google Slides out for this one, Pika.
Good.
Thanks for the follow too. But yeah, that is Show. Shadow Teddie. we don't know about Shadow Teddie. Shadow Teddie is a mystery. I even forgot to change the color of the text for Shadow Teddie. This is my best guess based on standard shadow mechanics. I think maybe he works. Like, I get the feeling you might be able to throw missiles at people. I don't know how many missiles, or if the what the paration looks like on the missiles, but yeah, it's just we don't know. I think it's probably just slightly less consistent than normal. So it belongs in the tier, but yeah, who knows? Maybe more access to SPTV is good, but does he even have the ability to build meter? We don't know. And that's the end of the tier. Like I said, mostly put there just because I don't know where to put him otherwise. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be that much worse than normal. But yeah, that is it for that tier. And that is 33 of our 37 characters, which leaves 4 very specific characters who you will probably know who they are by now, which are in the Will Struggle tier. Labrys! It's Labrys. It's time for the downplay. So Labrys has some nice tools, but she is missing multiple key mechanics. By key mechanics, I mean DPs. She has a DP. It is not good. It is fatally flawed. It is the slowest DP in the game while also having multiple drawbacks. She doesn't block string people. She cannot leave her 5A without leaving a gap, pretty much. You do have to instant block, but yeah. She doesn't have any good long range or full screen tools, so she has some in terms of chain knuckle, but chain knuckle is one of the worst long range tools in the game because of how little of the screen it hits and how open it leaves you. Her stumble mechanic is also fine, but it also is an anti-comeback mechanic, so if you get hit a lot, you basically can't come back. But the snowball mechanic is decent. It basically turns into a 2 to 3 hit machine, although notably a lot of the high tiers do that anyway. So the main strengths she has is that her punish and hard reach damage is good. Like, if she baits a DP against most characters, she is taking you to the corner with 4 to 5k damage. And most of her damage is burstable too, but that's not much of an issue, to be honest. But yeah, a lot of her gameplay is just relying on the system mechanics, which makes her almost comparably worse to everyone else, because everyone else has access to the system mechanics too. She uses some of them decently. Like the way her jump works makes her instant dash good, which works really well with jump B, which is basically her main neutral tool. The reason we use this a lot is because it is basically our only good tool. She has a decent 5A, some decent jump cancels from it. Yeah, good stuff, but it's just too reliant on stuff that everyone has and just not enough from it. Some of the worst defense in the game, because her main defensive option is an awakening, and even that is punishable on reaction if you're not doing anything into a full punish. Orb is an interesting tool and is probably one of the better neutral tools, but has its weaknesses. Ariadne isn't invuln to everything. You can just sort of run up and kill her. But yeah, character's okay, it's just not enough. And yeah, missing those major mechanics is just, it hurts you too much. There's very little you can do to someone who understands those weaknesses and exploits them properly. And just does awfully against the top tiers too. Like, Yukari and Naoto are just hopeless matchups for her. But yeah. Hey Than, good to see you. Came just in time. But yeah, it's just... Labrys is one of the characters get worse over time. You might have to expand on that. I think she has... A lot of the discoveries have helped her a little bit, so she has fuzzies on some of the strong characters. But yeah, it's just not quite enough, and as other characters gain more and more, she will fall slightly behind too. Yeah, we gotta love the Google Slides done. I'm sure you will enjoy the VoD after the fact. And I will release the slides and some other stuff. I will mention that soon. But yeah, Labrys doesn't quite have what it takes, unfortunately. Like, missing those key mechanics is just, it's so harmful. Like, you are stuffed in a lot of circumstances, and it's just not reliable. And Shadow Labrys basically is the same thing, but she loses access to a lot of the system mechanics that she's reliant on. So Gold Burst and One More Burst are absolutely key to her character, and she does not work with Frenzy. Like, the character's built to not do what Frenzy does. So for example, she can't chain us specials into each other. The Paration just doesn't work. She can't super multiple times in a row, not consistently in a way that does damage anyway. And just the councils don't help her very much. It just doesn't work. Her 5AA is okay, but it's just impractical. It makes confirming so much harder, and it's just so much more inconsistent, and the average damage is one of the best parts of Labrys, and you're taking that away. So in my opinion, just worse Labrys. Why would you do this to yourself? Still has some decent options in terms of jump beat, and can be useful in some matchups if you get the Frenzy at the right time, but in my opinion, just not worth it. And Akihiko is the last one in this list, apart from Shadow. So very high damage confirms, but does just have to work so hard to get his hits. Like, he doesn't, I couldn't even think of a third move to put here for his decent moves. Like, this is 5A. He has very good 5A and 2A. And this is SB Cork. Well, it should be SB Cork, because full screen-ish invul move is nice. That fatals and leads into decent damage. But it costs meter. So yeah, he converts decently, but just doesn't do anything else. And that's kind of a problem. His 2B is good. It doesn't have that much range. A lot of the stronger air options that you want to be 2Bing in this game, a lot of the stronger jump Cs will still beat that 2B. He does get a lot of damage from it, I agree, but I don't think it is that special in my eyes. Yes, it was absolutely destroying me in my set work that I had with Domo, but I think that's more of a Labrys problem than anything else. But yeah, just decent-ish mix, but just sort of very risky what he does, and weak to reversals, weak to basically everything, weak to leaving. It just doesn't have much. I mean, the most interesting part to me is that his jump is very low and very fast. And yeah, he has some anti-projectile and full screen tools with the duck and the weave, but nothing consistent, and doesn't help him against the actual untouchable characters because they hit in weird ways. So yeah, just sort of a character that lacks anything that threatening. Like, yes, once he's hitting you, he's threatening, and once he bursts you, or yes, if he 2Bs you, sure, but that shouldn't happen consistently. Or at least he has to work so much harder for that to happen consistently. So yeah, that is Akihiko. And Shadow Akihiko, I think, better burst damage, as in damage that comes from nowhere, but he kind of does that anyway, so why would you lose the consistency in order to gain that? Stuff being unburstable is nice for him. Like, he does have to be up close and personal to do a lot of his damage, but I don't think it's worth being inconsistent in my eyes, and losing some of those other tools. And that rounds out the entire list. And like I said before, positioning in the list doesn't necessarily mean one character is better than the other. I just think it means that they either are slightly more consistent or has a better matchup spread. So for example here, I think Akihiko isn't missing as many tools, but just doesn't do as well against most of the cast as Labrys does. Like, Labrys can hold her own against some other characters, for example, like S.Aigis or Shadow Labrys actually has ways to compete there, where Akihiko just doesn't. So yeah, I think that rounds out the list. Yeah, apologies if you missed some of the stream. I will, the VoD will exist, and I will upload it to YouTube and timestamp it as well to try and be helpful. But yeah, that is it. Some final notes about the list. So the data can be found in that link. I will link the slides in Labrys chat at some point. let's see what this looks like when I do this. Yep, so here is the list of all the characters and all of their ratings, including the total for each character and the rating order according to the total score that they got, according to how I rated them and the position I put them in my list. And the difference between those two, just in case you're interested, most of them are within 3 positions of how I've scored them, which is kind of cool. And sort of the conversion here as well. Let's see, can I get back into these slides? Yep. Alright, and yeah, so like I said, my list positions don't vary greatly relative to the positions on the list, which is nice. This is data basically, I've sort of done this based on my experience playing and watching high-level Persona. Like, I've played a lot of games. I have played against 95% of these characters, every one of these characters, but most of them I have at least a couple of matches against different people. And yeah, I do watch a decent amount of Persona as well, including JP matches and tournaments. Now there are arguments to be made that most of modern Persona isn't at the highest level, but you can get quite a lot even from watching anything, to be honest. Like, you see the interactions that take place. And even if someone isn't executing a game plan perfectly, you can see what they could have done. And things are subject to change over time, so things always get discovered, meta shifts. So for example, I think Marie was lower than she currently is because people didn't know what she could do. And now that they do, she has changed position. And yeah, things always change, so who knows? Maybe someone's going to discover some broken tech. Maybe they won't. Do not take anything I've said here personally. Player skill and character played are pretty independent in my experience. You get a lot of bad players playing, well, not bad players, but weaker players playing top tiers and stronger players playing low tiers. Like, it doesn't really matter. People play what they want, which is great. I'm very happy about that. People aren't just flocking to the strongest characters. And yeah, you just play the game to have fun and be as strong as you can be. Try not to attack people based on their opinion or character. We're all here to have fun and play the game. And yeah, that's kind of my final point. Have fun and play the game and do your best. I mean, you shouldn't really use this list for anything important, to be honest. It doesn't really matter. There's nothing that useful to take away apart from the individual points about maybe the ways to exploit some stronger characters. But yeah, just have fun with it. It's always possible to beat someone. Pretty much always. Like, in a tournament setting, maybe the probability gets very, very low, but you got to try for it. That's what makes fighting games fun. And one of the reasons I play the characters that I do. So, I think that is it. Yes, that is the end of the slideshow. I imagine there are no questions because there aren't that many people here. Obviously, if people want to ask questions, you're free to do so. But if I don't see anything in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to close out the stream. And until then, I'm just going to talk to myself. Exactly 2 hours and 3 minutes, actually. Not too bad in terms of length. I didn't go into that much detail, and not many people turned up to ask questions, but I'm happy with that. Continue hating for no reason at all. That is understandable. To be honest, that's most of the community. People love hating. Can I go back over Naoto? Which Naoto do you want me to go over? Let's see. Can I get back to Naoto? Normal. So normal Naoto is, yeah, at the top of competitive tier. I don't think I said anything too controversial here, which is basically, like, she has a lot of very good tools, but it's kind of just, like, slightly less broken than S.Naoto because she doesn't have access to raid as easily, and raid is the main reason S.Naoto is broken because of how fate works. Yeah, so nothing too much to say apart from that. A lot of these moves that I've listed here are extremely good, and a lot of her buffs in 2.5 were also kind of crazy. Like, this thing turning around is absolute nonsense. A lot of how her shots work are absolute nonsense, but character is strong and consistent, so does very well, but there isn't really a reason to play her over Shadow. So Kaji's question, which is, what's my thoughts on character strength based on the setting? Some characters get slightly worse based on the setting. It's mostly characters with slightly weaker mix-up. For example, Labrys, you're probably going to be blocking those overhead guillotines offline. Some lions you might block offline. But for the most part, PC and PSN doesn't feel too much different from each other. Yosuke cameo? No Yosuke cameo. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Any other questions before I end things off? If not, I will take my leave and take my 2-hour video. Alright. Thank you very much for coming, everyone who appeared. I will be uploading this and linking to this stuff soon. Will there be more Labrys downplay next time? There's always time for more Labrys downplay. But yeah, for another time. Alright. Catch you all later. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Crazy how time flies when I wonder if the path is in the right direction. But I do believe things come to light by accident.
Brings me when things fall apart. What matters at the end is how you left the mark. Fire in my soul, fire in my heart. Till you see me on the other side of stars.
Oh, the journey starts from where we did first step. No one's sure what lies ahead before them breath. Brothers may be rough and tough, but we will meet somewhere.
Good EP. Yeah, we're all gonna go for the mix-up. Yes, he does. Good games.
I mean, he'll win, but barely.